Hello, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for coming to my talk here. I know it's getting late in the day, so I appreciate everyone showing up. So I just want to quickly introduce myself. My name is John Bartkiw. I am a member of the developer relations team on the engineering side. So every day I write a line of code at least. So I still have my engineering chops despite being in the corporate environment. So what I will be talking about today is social VR. But before I do that, just give you a little background on who I am and what I do. So on the developer relations team, we focus on helping you make better apps and games. And so what we do is we help you integrate any of the functionality that we have. We help you do things like hit performance. All of those kind of things that you need to make a rock-solid VR experience, we're available to help. We help man the forums and answer questions there, and then just do one-on-one help. So if you are a game developer looking for help in the VR space, make your game better, we're the team that can help you. So my background is in developer relations. So prior to Oculus, I was started at Microsoft back in the original Xbox days through Xbox 360 launch, doing AAA games and live services. After that, I jumped over to Valve to work on Steam and Steamworks. So once again, gaming platforms trying to make PC games great again, in which we all know that was successful. And then finally, I jumped a little bit to the publishing world and worked for a small indie publisher called Devolver Digital, helping indies make great PC games. And so now I'm at Oculus, and what I'm here to talk to you about is social VR. As you've seen today in all of the keynotes, talks, and whatnot, everything's about social interaction. At least that's where a lot of the funness comes in VR. And so what I want to do is put you in those experiences as an end user, and as a developer, I want to let you do that and experiment with that in a quick and easy way. Because right now, if you decide you wanted to do a social VR app, where would you start? How would you start to experiment with that? If I'm, say, making a 2D roguelike game, it's really easy for me to experiment with co-op. I can just put two people on the screen or do split screen or something like that. With an HMD, I'm not doing split screen. And so instantly you're talking about overhead. I need to know about networking. I need to know about matchmaking, all those kind of things that make it difficult for you just to get to square one of like, how do I get two people in a room to interact in VR? And that's just the basic ground level. The real interesting stuff happens after that. And so what the goal of this is to get you to that ground level. So we will be creating a test bed for social interactions in VR. Nothing super deep, but by the end of this, you will have 2 or more users in an app together. We will also be doing it in Unity, so it's something that everyone can do easily, and it will be done in 30 minutes or less, or your money back. The way we do that is with a lot of stuff that doesn't involve much code. There will be some code, not that I'm going to be showing too much, but the good news is that all of this that I'm showing you is already shipped. So this is all in the Avatar SDK, so it's easy to download right now. You will have access to all of the code, all of the assets, etc. So it's quick and easy to use. So what we won't cover are best practices for social interactions. So we're not going to talk about how you should touch people, how you should not touch people in VR. We won't talk about space bubbles or anything like that. That's all the stuff that we all need to be experimenting with and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. Because to be honest with you, like, we're not there yet. And there's still a lot of bad social interactions in VR, and it's only going to get worse until we experiment and figure out more about that. The other thing that we won't be talking about are all of the intricacies of how I do physics and interact with objects in VR. This isn't about throwing baseballs to each other and catching them precisely, taking into account like network lag and stuff like that. Nothing like that. It's more just, how do I have basic interactions? How do I see someone in VR? How do I wave to them? How do I express my emotions in VR in a basic way? So how are we going to do that? So the first thing we're going to do is set up a basic kind of like ground rule. And it's just going to be a basic small room. with a 2D plane on the floor so I know where I am and I'm not going to fall through. We're going to put some walls up around it so I can't fall off the edge. And then in the middle of the room, what I'm going to do is set up a nice little sphere. And what that does, it gives me a center of reference so I know where I am. I know when I turn relative to the world where I am. And then I'm also going to use that sphere as an indicator. So one of the problems with VR is UI is hard. Like in 2D, I just put a button on screen, I know what it's saying, I know what that text is saying. In VR, it's a little more difficult. I can't just put a pane in the world because I might walk away from it and I can no longer read what it says. And so to get around that, I use the colors in both the floor and the sphere to indicate things like, hey, there's a network connection that's been made, or you're the host versus the client. All things like that that make it easy to visually recognize what's going on without having to deal with text and UI. So in that room, we're going to add user avatars. So in this case, we're going to use the Oculus avatars. It's something that you saw in the keynote earlier, and something that is available to all users to customize. And those avatars are going to move around and interact. We're going to use VoIP so they can talk to each other. We're going to use their hands so you can see what they're pointing at and doing. And you're going to be able to walk around the room. It's a real boring room, and to be honest with you, my dev art looks uglier than these slides. Like, these slides are way better than what you're going to see in a second. But that's not really important. What's important is that it's just easy to get into. So there's a few different pieces of tech that help you get in there. First thing is Oculus Utilities for Unity. And what this is a library that you include in your Unity scene, and it allows you to do a bunch of things just for free. So there's a bunch of scripts, a bunch of prefabs, and other supplemental resources that just make everything just magically work for you in Unity. As we all know with Unity, part of the power is that it does a lot of things for you. I don't have to worry about the nitty-gritty and coding from the ground up. And so that's what we will be using. So this is available for download already at developer.oculus.com downloads, but it's also available in the Unity store, so you can just install it from there. And as everything that I'm talking about here, it's all publicly available for use in any app. And it goes for both Rift and Gear. Everything that I talked about today totally works on our mobile platform as well. It's a little less expressive because you don't have touch controllers for hands. You just have the Gear controller. But all of the basic stuff just works out of the box. And it works cross-platform. So you can have one person on Gear, one person on Rift for this demo. So this is what you would be used to with Unity. And if I use my magical presenter powers, I will bring up the OVR camera rig, which is the first prefab that we're going to be using today. And all this does is replace your main camera with something that will use the HMD. All right, so this is something that allows you to put yourself instantly into a 3D space without a single line of code. And so you just drag it into your scene like magic. And I will show you what that looks like. So for those of you unfamiliar, this is the Oculus store. And I have all these wonderful demos ready to go. So as I said, I'm going to have this 3D room. There's my wonderful blue floor. And under me is my wonderful black sphere. And all I can do right now is look around. But as you can see, I am there. I'm in the room. And not a single line of code has been written. I don't have hands. I don't have a body. But I'm there. And that's the starting point. Oops. So the next obvious step is moving from being a static camera in the room to being able to move around the room. And so the next prefab that we have is something called OVR Player Controller. And what this does is attach that camera that you just saw to an object in the space that adds a physical capsule so I can interact with physical objects. It also adds basic movement, so it handles inputting of the touch controllers or a gamepad. And then it also provides some simple menuing system. So it's imported the same way. And as I said, we get physics, movement, the crosshair component, which I didn't mention, so if you want to be able to pick things visually from your site, and then the menuing and text components. We're not going to be using the crosshair or the text fields in this demo, but the rest we will. So once again, not a single line of code written, and I need my controllers. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say that one of the key components of the touch controllers are these wonderful lanyards that you can put around your wrists, so you make sure you don't accidentally throw them through a wall. So here I am back in the room, look around, and now my left stick allows me to move, and my right stick allows me to rotate. Once again, not a single line of code. I can interact with objects, so if I walk over the sphere, I go up because it's a physical object. You may notice this is not very comfortable, so this is definitely not a demo showing off locomotion in VR and ways to do it without making people sick, because that's not one of the goals. But you would obviously be able to change your locomotion to whatever you wanted to better fit comfort. All right, so there we are. One of the big problems with that demo is obviously I'm not physically there, right? I didn't see myself. I didn't feel like I was there. I was just a camera moving around. And so what that brings us to next is our Avatar SDK. And this is the actual physical representation of myself, torso, head, and hands that I can bring into a scene. So it's similar to what we were just talking about. It's a library that you import. It has a bunch of scripts, prefabs, and other things that you can just import into your scene and use stock. So once again, no coding needed. It's available for download, same place as before, or in the Unity Asset Store. Really easy to do. And there's two key prefabs that we want to look at. The first is the local avatar. So this is something that I would use for myself. I'm in the scene, it represents me and all my motions, and it responds to the controllers. So automatically, my hands are wired up to what input I'm giving. My head's wired up to the camera and moving around. And it can just easily be attached to the OVR player controller, which was the prefab that we had just added to the scene. And what that gives me is a full body, hands, and, as I said, responding to controllers. So lanyards on, headset going on, and voila, I have hands. I'm still in the same room, all the same actions, but now I have hands. And I did add one little bit of code, which changes the camera so you can see me. So now I have a full torso, a head that moves around, and hands that move around. I can do things like point, I can do thumbs up, I can do air guns, jazz hands, all kinds of fun, expressive things that make me look almost human. One of the key things is this is the generic avatar. This is what you get until you personalize it, which is interesting that I can be a person, but it's not necessarily as interesting as me being me. And so that's what we're going to move on to next. So, local avatar is me, And now I also need to be able to represent other people in a space. Because there's one thing to be in a space, in a virtual space by myself, but it's far more interesting to be in that space with other people. And so for that, we have another prefab called a remote avatar. Very similar, has all of the same components. The key difference is that instead of taking controller inputs, what it takes is basically packets of data that represent motion and interactions. And it's driven by me. I get those packets, I put them into a remote avatar and let it play back. And so it's the same kind of magic pulled into the scene. It's got the same components of body, hands, and controllers. And I will show you what that looks like. All right. So it's important to note that this demo takes some actual coding. So up to this point, we've just been using prefabs that we've basically dragged into the scene, and then we're able to interact with them. Remote avatars are slightly different in that for me to be able to add them to the scene, I'd really need to instantiate them and figure out where they belong, who they belong to. So this is the same scene as before. Hold on a second. All right, we have our first technical difficulty. Let me just double check that we are running the correct app. Yep. All right, we'll give it one more quick try. No good presentation goes without some kind of technical difficulty. There we go. Okay, so here I have instantiated a remote avatar. As you can see, it's kind of got this glowy, I don't know what I would refer to as, and that just grounds it to the floor, and so it's easy to see where it presides in that plane. And once again, it looks just like the avatar that I have representing myself because it's generic. But what I can do is I can put these anywhere I want in the scene, move them around, and have them play back data as I see fit. All right. Okay, so now we have multiple avatars in the scene, but that's about it, right? We don't have anyone connecting from remotely, we don't have anyone interacting, and those avatars look identical. We don't have the personalization component in there. And so what that takes us next to is the platform SDK, and what this is a set of services that we provide to do basic platformy stuff. So think of defining who I am. So I can grab my user profile to grab my gamer tag or whatever you want to call it. I can grab, in this case, my avatar ID. I can do things like matchmaking. I can do invites to rooms and whatnot. And this is kind of the glue that adds all of those ways to bring people together. And hopefully in an easy way. It's available for download, same spots. It's also available in the asset store. And so we've got your identity, which is who you are. We've got matchmaking, which gives you a way to find strangers to play with, if that's what you're into. We have basic networking, so things like peer-to-peer invites. And then we have all the other things that you would expect with a social platform. So things like achievements, leaderboards, cloud saves, all that kind of stuff, all the typical services that you're used to with all the other platforms like Steam, Xbox Live, PlayStation. We have all of that. So just to do a little bit of code up on the screen, just to give you the calling model of how we do things. So we definitely do a standard async call pattern. So you make a call, and then you basically poll for messages, and then finally you parse that message. So in this example, show you a little bit how to do it in Unity. Unity has a bunch of helpers, so you can set up callbacks to be able to handle all of that for you. And so you just basically make a call to something. In this case, is user entitled to application, which is a call to say, hey, does this user own the app? Are they allowed to play the app? And then we have the onComplete field, and then I pass in a pointer to a function that says, this is what I want you to call when it comes back. And then I just have code that handles that message when it comes back. This model, if you're not used to an async calling pattern, can be a little difficult at first. It definitely leads you to a point where you have a bunch of state machine-y type stuff going on, which can be a little complex at first, because you're not just saying, hey, I want to do A, B, C, and then handle the results. You end up having to do, hey, I want to do A, wait for something to come back. And then when it comes back, I do something. And then I do B, wait for something to come back. And that can be a little tricky at first. The upside of it is that an async calling pattern means that while all those calls are going on, you're not waiting. And so I don't have to wait for the back end to say, hey, this person is entitled. I can just go do something else. So in that time, I'm still rendering frames. We're still hitting 90 hertz. It's all running smooth. And the other upside of having something that's very state machine-y like this is that it actually ends up being more solid as far as coding-wise. Yes, it will be harder to kind of get up and running, but it's definitely more pervious to crazy bugs and whatnot. Once you have a state machine running, it ends up making it easier to debug things in the long term. So now we want to personalize that avatar. So I showed you the call to grab a user and check their entitlements. One of the other things that we get back from that is the ID. So who is this user? And it's basically a 64-bit identifier that is unique to them. You also get back their name. Right, so John or whatever they've chosen to name themselves, and an image URL for their profile, for their 2D profile, and their basic presence. Are they online or offline? And what's important in this point is the ID, because that's how I will define who you are for that avatar. I say, hey, you've got this avatar, set it to this ID. So we have local avatar, and it just has a parameter on it called Oculus user ID, and I just set that to whatever ID I want. Theoretically, I could set that to a random ID, and it'll pick whoever is associated with that random ID and show them, but obviously that's not as compelling as showing the actual avatar that I chose to make. So I will give you a quick demo of what that looks like. Does everyone remember from my second slide what color my avatar was? Oh, no. Come on, that's an easy one. Wait till you get the harder questions later. Okay, it was green. We'll see. Oh, that's not supposed to happen like that. All right, here we go. Come on, green. Green! All right. No, that's not the button I wanted to press. There we go. All right, so there I am. This is now my personalized avatar. Using this camera angle so you can kind of see it from outside of my body, or my avatar, whatever you want to call it. And so this is who I've chosen to represent myself. Got this nice spiky hair, glasses, and this nice cowboy kerchief, because I love country music. And so this is what grounds me in VR. No matter what application I go to, this is going to be me. This is me. I've chosen this as a user, and that's what I want. And that seems very simple, but it's also very powerful. It's amazing how much that presence, even though this looks really nothing like me, and I'm not a big country music fan, it still is something that I can relate to and feel like I'm in the game. And that's important when it comes to social VR. As the new avatars roll out later next year, all of this code will continue to work. everything will be the same. There should not be anything that requires major updates. So there's definitely no reason to wait to try and look at things like avatars in a social setting. So now we have my real avatar in a physical or a virtual physical space. And what we want to do now is bring in other people. And to do that, we have what we call rooms, which are things similar to lobbies or sessions on other platforms. And what it is just an abstract concept, basically a physical, or not physical, an abstract room that I can invite people to and identify who's in that room. And I can have public rooms, I can have rooms that are just for friends, I can have rooms that are invite only, or I can have rooms that are generated and populated through matchmaking. So if I want to find people who have, a certain hobby and we all want to talk about Magic the Gathering or something exciting like that, I can find that via matchmaking. And the Rooms API is fairly simple. Basically, I need to join or create a room, and then just pay attention to what changes. So we provide a bunch of different messages that you will receive as an application that says someone has joined the room, someone has left the room, there's been some update to data in the room. So you can apply a bunch of metadata to a room to do things like define what level's being played or what difficulty's being played. And that can be shared to all users. And you just have to listen for these messages to be able to act on them appropriately. So we have a call called set update notification callback. And basically, you just pass that function pointer, and that gets called whenever these messages come in. So you don't even have to do the polling and the listening. All of that magically happens for you, and your function will get called. And then once you do get that message called, you can just crack open that message and grab things like who's the room owner, who are the members of the room, who's in there right now, and then act on those appropriately. Invites are something that dovetail into rooms because it's one thing to be in a room, but I need to be able to invite my friends in the room, and I'm not going to call them on the phone and send them a 64-bit integer value to join, because that just doesn't make sense. And so there are ways that I can programmatically send and receive invites, and I can not only receive an invite when I'm in app, but also when the app launches. So I can launch straight into an app from an invite and grab that data. So we have two paths. One is get invitables, which is this call that says, hey, of all my friends that own this app, get me their ID so I can decide if I want to send them an invite. And what that means is I can then in-app create my own UI to do a nice fancy invite pane or something like that if I want to do that. The other part we have is called launch invitable user flow, and that brings up the system UI with a list of your friends that you can invite. So you don't even have to create your own UI to enable invites. It just magically happens for you. On the accepting side, you just have to set this callback called set room invite notification callback, and what that does is get fired anytime the user accepts an invite. And so on that, you would just do the appropriate action of saying, hey, this user wants to invite or wants to accept an invite to room X, and then you just do the smart thing of joining room X at that time. So we're in a room, we've invited someone. What do we do now? How do we interact? And as we all know in VR, one of the great things is being able to see them and interact with them, but it's even more powerful to be able to talk to them and listen to them. In the past, something like VoIP would be difficult. You'd have to pull the mic, grab all the waveform data, throw it into a packet, send it over the wire, all that kind of stuff, just to get it up and running. In Unity, on our platform, we do all that magic for you. So essentially, all you have to do to add voice to your chat is call some simple things. So one is start. I want to start a chat with Peter. I call start, passing in his user ID, automatically sets it up. On the other end, I can stop it anytime I want. Peter's yelling at me, being abusive. I say, no, stop, one call. So I don't have to deal with anything like grabbing data from the mic. All that happens. I don't have to deal with piping audio to an audio device. All that happens for me. I don't have to worry about networking, figuring out how to send those packets over the wire. That's all done for me. There are a couple other callbacks that you can pull or set up to be able to handle situations like someone's trying to call me. So that's the set VoIP connect request callback. And then we also have set VoIP state change callback. And that's just so you can detect when connection has changed. So Peter's hung up on me, decided to go off and do something else. That gets fired. And so I know right away that he's done. So we're talking. One of the things that's very apparent with humans is when I talk, my lips move. I am not an alien who speaks out of a voice box out of my wherever. And so we wanted avatars to be able to indicate that. And so what we have is voice visualization built into the avatars. So your mouth lights up white and kind of pulses with the appropriate volume coming through your connection. And so to hook that up, to basically hook VoIP up to the avatar is very simple again. So we have this callback that says, hey, call this function anytime there's VoIP data, right? Anytime I'm speaking into the microphone. And then what you do is you just feed that into the local avatar. So we have this other call, local avatar, update voice visualization. And you just pass it the data. You don't even have to do anything else. Like you don't have to process it. You don't have to do anything fancy. All just magically works for you. And it ends up being something, the visualness of it just really adds to the experience. So this is the part where we get into the fun stuff. So anyone here a network engineer? Networking engineer on the game side? All right, we got one. For the rest of you, do not worry. Everyone, when they think of networking, they think, oh my God, like I don't know what's going on. I don't know, like leasing the significant byte on here, and then I gotta like think of byte order over here and all that kind of stuff. The beauty is if you're not a network engineer, and you think it's super complex, it's gotten a lot easier over the years. So you used to have to think about things like, how do I punch through a NAT? How do I connect to this person? What port am I going to use? What's their IP address? All that kind of stuff. All that stuff is gone away. Because the internet is a great thing, internet companies as a whole have said that kind of sucks, so we want to fix that. So they've gone off and created great technologies. So our peer-to-peer is built off of WebRTC. It is an open source project that I believe was started by Google. And it's just an amazing piece of technology if you've never done networking before, because it just does everything for you. So it does things like NAT traversal, NAT punching, and then it also does things like automatic relay. So one of the big problems with modern networking is that if I want to talk to my home computer, there's probably like 17 million bumps in the road, right? Like you go left, right, left, right. And a lot of times they just can't talk to each other because my firewall at home saying, no, like you're like some Russian hacker, and I'm not letting you in, even though it's me at work trying to talk to it. And so where we come in is Relay is a known good server. So if that's the case and we can't talk to each other, my computer will say, oh, well, at least I can talk to this Facebook server over here because I know they're trusted. My home computer can say, yeah, I know that's trusted as well. And so they end up just talking to that server, and that server passes all that information. One of the beauty things about the Facebook acquisition of Oculus is Facebook infrastructure is global. So there's one of these relays essentially within like walking distance of everyone's home globally. And so things like lag, things like that are just less of an issue than they used to be. And with our peer-to-peer, we leverage all of this, and we do it without you needing to know anything about the user besides their user ID. So you don't need to know their IP address. You don't need to know their port. All you need to know is, hey, Peter's ID is X. I want to send him data. And just bam, it just happens. I don't worry about NAT traversal, nothing. So we have a couple calls. So I can know, once again, similar to what I had on the VoIP calls, when someone's trying to connect to me, and then when that connection's changed, when he's gone offline or closed the connection. And we can send all the typical types of network packets that you'd want. So reliable and unreliable. Under the covers, WebRTC actually treats them very similar. So it's not your typical TCP or UDP. It's something different, but it's all abstracted, so you don't really have to worry about that. All you need to know is that it works, and the performance is good enough for real-time applications. We have a number of titles in the Oculus store already using this for games, and it's all performant and all does what it needs to do. And so you've got send packet. I can send data to Peter, and then I can read data that comes to me. Fairly straightforward and simple. So how do we use all of that with avatars? So you saw my avatar moving around. My head was moving. My hands were moving. My fingers were moving. That's a lot of stuff to keep track of. I'm not a networking guy. How am I going to keep track of all of that and then figure out what I got to send over the wire, when I got to send it? We take care of all of that for you. And so what we have is a method for you to record and play back all of that data. And so you basically grab data that the avatar gives you and send it over the wire with send packet. On the other side, I get that packet. I know who it's from, and I know what their user ID is, and I can act on it. And so I have this local avatar.record packets, which is just basically saying, hey, start recording all my motions. And then we have this packet recorded callback that I set up, so when I am done recording a bunch of stuff, this function gets called. And in that function, all I do is grab the size of that packet and decide to send it over the wire. It's pretty straightforward. It obviously sounds a little more complex, but I assure you, even if you're not a network engineer, you can step through this code in the sample and really grok what's going on. All right, let us do a quick demo. So I am going to ask my faithful helper over here. We got Peter, who's going to help me with this demo. This is a live demo over conference Wi-Fi, over the internet, and then back through conference Wi-Fi. So buyer beware, but I think I'm willing to risk it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch into the app, and then I'm going to send Peter an invite. Unfortunately, what doesn't appear on the screen is the invite UI. So that's all in headset. So I'm using the system UI that I just make with a single call. And then I will invite him. So I'm doing that right now. You cannot see it. I see a not quite list of friends yet. It's thinking. Still thinking. There we go. All right, selecting Peter, sending an invite. Invite is sent. Hopefully, Peter will see it. So at this point, what we're trying to do is just send all of those avatar packets over the wire. So not moving around. Oh, all right, so hold on. I can move. All right, so there was that personal space and inappropriate touching. Okay. So here's Peter in front of me. That's his personal avatar. He's obviously of the purple variety instead of the green. But as you can see, his hands are moving around. I can see his fingers. And it's actually pretty performant. Like, it's not jerky. It's not herky-jerky. And all I'm doing is taking those avatar packets and sending them over the wire. All right. So I'm going to back out of this, because it's one thing to see him in there and be able to hear him in the echo of the presentation over that. But the next step is to figure out how to move around in the space. All right. So moving avatars. So up to this point, we've just been sending the avatar packets over the wire. That's something that I grabbed right from the avatar. What I want to do is also send his position. And so basically what I'm going to do is grab his position in the world and his rotation and add it to the packet that I'm sending in. So we do a little bit of bit packing. If you're not a network engineer, once again, don't freak out. All it is saying, hey, I got all this data. let's cram it down into as small space as I can, because I want to be able to send it over the wire quickly, and the bigger it is, the longer that takes. So I take all those bits, cram them all together, and then on the other side, I take that crammed together bits and I spread them out. That's all it is. That's all bit packing is. There's no real special sauce or science to it. And what I'm going to be sending over the wire are two parameters of the Unity object, which is the body transform. So I have the local position and local rotation, and that will get me where they are in 3D space. All right, last demo. Let's hope it works. Still remembering the lanyards on the touch controllers. All right, so here I am. Once again, you cannot see the invite UI. I apologize for that. And invite sent. And there is Purple Peter. All right, and now Peter can move around. I can see him moving around. We can both move around. And Peter would be seeing something very similar on his screen over there. The colors would be a little different because we do indicators for the floor of who's host and who's client. But essentially, you'd be seeing the same thing. And I'm sure he's hearing the same echoing in VoIP that I am. And yeah, so once we got this up and running, hold on a second, I'm gonna drop out of this because this echoing is killing me. But just to give you a little background, so I put this sample together mainly to experiment myself. I'd never done any kind of social interaction before in VR, and I wanted to try it out. And once we got that up and running, right, that looks super basic, and it is super basic. I can't tell you the fun we had. Like, it sounds super dorky, but like the first thing was Rochambeau. Like we came up with like, what is rock, paper, scissors, right? And then that turns into like other games and whatnot. And there's no physical interactions, right? We're not even interacting with each other. We're showing each other things and doing things. But just that minor presence just blew my mind that like we had fun. And it was like simple. Now imagine what you can do with all of that plus on top of it, right? Like at the end of the day, that's your palette. Your palette is like amazing. The tools that are in social VR that you can create with, it's just mind-blowing. And what this hopefully gets you is to square one. This is square one. And if you can just jump to square one and now start playing with that, and maybe you weren't a networking guy, right? Or a networking girl. But now you have this to start and start playing with, I'm excited to see what you could do. So I don't have the slides. All right, so this is just the basics. So where could you take it from here? There's a number of different things. If you are the networking person and you're excited about that stuff, probably not. Why not change this to client server? So currently this is just peer-to-peer. So you can have up to 4 people in it and they all send packets to each other. That's nice and all, but not very network efficient. Easy to switch to client server if that's your thing. Interpolation. Right now, all of that data being sent over the wire is literally static. So I have where I am at that frame, I get a new packet, and I'm instantly teleported over there. It didn't look that way because it was so quick and easy, because even though this is conference Wi-Fi, it's still pretty fast. But if I was on a slower connection, you would notice that. So easy enough to make it so smooth interpolation between positions. And then finally, well, not necessarily finally, but as I mentioned before, comfort zones, things like muting, whatnot, very hot topic, very important. And to be honest with you, it's something that we need lots of people experimenting with. Maybe it's a bubble. Maybe it's something else. But that's something to experiment with. And then finally, physical objects. That's definitely more of a leap, because you're going to have to deal with how do I handle a physics implementation over the wire. But if you're up for a technical challenge, there is no better one than that. So that is where we are. That is my presentation. I will say all of that code is available, as I said, to download right now in the Avatar SDK. If there are any questions that people have, we do have the microphone available in the front. And then if there are any questions about underlying code around all of that, if you've looked at the sample before, I'm also willing to chat about that. OK, thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Peter, for your help.